Joshua, chapter 12, chapter 8, verse 14. Okay, it says, Vayihi, and it was, Kirot Melech Ai, when the king of Ai saw, the Maharu, he quickly got up, he quickly, Vayashkimu got up, Vayetzu, and he went, Anshe Ha'ir, the Krat Yisrael, and the men of the city went out to meet in battle, in other words, Israel, the Milchama, okay, for the battle. Who v'kol amo l'moed l'fnei ha'arava, he and his nation to the appointed place or time before the Arava, before the plains. V'hu lo yada, and he did not know, ki orev lo me'acharei ir, that there were ambushes for him from behind the city. Any questions? Only questions on why they would do things. Okay? Again, it's when the king of Ai saw, that's one thing, fine. That is, so he hurried, he got up and left. And the men of the people, the men of the city left to meet Israel in battle. He and all his nation, Lamoed, to the appointed time, normally it's appointed time. Which is, it's an interesting statement in its own right. What does it mean, the appointed time? Lefnei Arava, before the plains. He did not know that the ambushes for him or to him from the back of the city.
There's a lot of repetition about time there. Why is that? Like hasten, early rising.
Okay.
Appointed time.
Right. What's the appointed time of? Also, for those just from the grammatical point here, if you notice, it's Vayimaharu, Vayashkimu, Vayetzu. So you could translate that as and they hurried and they got up early and they went out. It should have said, by the way, and they got up early and they hurried and they left. That would have made more sense rather than and they hurried and they woke up early and they left, because otherwise it makes no sense. Okay, so you have to figure out which way it goes. Second thing you have to ask yourself is it the and? Do you translate it and? Or do you just say that the men of the city hurried, got up early and hurried and went out? In other words, when do you put the and in? That'll be one of the questions you have to ask. Okay, when does the end happen, or does it ever happen? You know what I'm asking?
Is it even needed?
Right. Because really, the vav conversive, remember, changes the words, changing the word. Sometimes you translate it as and this happened and this action. Other times you don't. It's just the action. So now, as a translator, you have to figure out what's going on here. It's not and, this clearly the first part, Vayihi is not and when the king of Ai saw. That's clearly not an and, that's when the king of Ai saw. It was when the king of Ai saw, period. Okay? It's not the and. The questions now become for the Vayimaharu, Vayashkimu, Vayetzu, Anshe Ha'ir, the Krat Yisrael. Are all those ands, or is any one of them ands, and so on and so forth. So I don't really know what ArtScroll does with that, but I'm just pointing that out for the grammatical point. Okay. So now Rashi says, when it comes to the appointed time, what is that? So it says L'zman hayom shenatzu yachad me'etmol, to the time of day that they gathered together from the previous time. Bo to sha'an neitze, and that time they went out. Shahayu menachim. Why they wait for that time? So Rashi explains, because they were soothsayers. Soothsayers, in other words, they were using their magic to figure out the right time to go out. They had their astrologers ready, and it says you go out from 10 to 12, you can be victorious. Let's say that sort of time frame. Okay, so that was mean Lamoed, the time that they divined or their diviners told them to go out, their forecasters. That's the moed they went out to. Okay? Meshudas David takes it a little easier. He says, Lamoed, what's that mean? Again, he's disagreeing a little bit with Rashi when he says, the time that they went out the first time. In other words, they decided to keep on the same schedule. Maybe they thought the Jews were late risers. I'm not sure why they would do that. If you go by Rashi, it makes sense because they had a forecast. They're magic men. They're whatever you would call it, wizards. Mm-hmm. They're wizards, and their wise men told them this is the proper time you can beat them. So it makes sense at that point to say La Moed, to the set time. To just say because they once went out that time, it's hard to understand why Mr. David wanted to say that, but that's what he's holding, that they were going on what they previously did.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Well, as ex-military, I would think it'd be because the commander said to go. That's the point.
Yeah, but no. So that would answer for the Herod, and they got up early and they went out. That's your command. But why Lamoed, to the appointed time? That's not the command anymore. Mm-hmm. Why was the commander waiting for a specific time? That's really the question you have to ask. There's an extra word here, and that's what they're all bothered by. Yeah.
That's also what Mike said is what Radak says based on the chart. Radak. At the time the king commanded.
Oh, that's what Radak says, isn't it? Where? Them away. Oh, the Radak, I don't know what he's reading, but I'm reading a different Radak now. He says to the time that was established. For instance, he said, but it doesn't explain why that time. Rashi is giving an explanation for why that time. The Radak is just saying that was the time that the king said we're going to go out, and we're going to be prepared to go out to war. The question is why?
Why did the king?
Why that time? Why that particular time? So Rashi is saying because they were given a forecast, whatever you want to call those magicians, or their wise men.
Yeah, you would think that when they got up early, and they would get command and go right away. That's what I think, but
right.
They waited to the appointed time.
Right. Okay, so let's go. Now let's see what the Malbim says. So the Malbim says like this. And it was when the king saw when the king saw that they were coming, that the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, were approaching the city and they were coming into the valley. So they hurried. And they woke up early and they went out to meet Israel. And they did not wait. The point is they did not wait until the Israelis, okay, the Israelis. Let's call them Israelis right now. It'll be easier. The Israelis came from the valley and to approach them until the gates of the city like they did the first time. Okay, so they wanted to avoid that. Let's not wait till they come to our city, to our gates. What we'll do is we'll go out to meet them. So that's why they go to the plains. It's the best defense is a good offense, right? Okay, so they're going out. And then he says, also, the first time that they went out, they hit them as they were going down, which is in the valley. So they said, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to beat them there. What's the moed? So here the Malbim goes, Yehoshua kavazman mugbal ima oref shalach lifnei shnei yamim. That it's talking about Joshua, who had fixed a set time with the ambushers that he sent 2 days before, that on the third day at a specific time we're going to go against the city. They will go against the city because in order they will be prepared for that. And now this time has come, Nishke HaMilchama, and they are involved in the war. So Malbim is not saying, who's the appointed time going to? To the ambushers. Because Joshua set aside, said in these many days, at this particular hour, we're going to go out. That's the moed. So everybody else, simple pshat is, simple understanding, that we're getting from Rashi and the Mesudas David and the Radak for that matter is that when the king saw, they hurried and they went, blah, 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 and it was for that specific time. Well, who's the specific time for? Malbim says that was for Joshua setting up for the ambushes.
Yeah.
He really flips that. Okay? So, Lifnei Arava, before the plains, these are the plains of Jericho that were in the east. Because after the camp of Israel stood, like this gimel, there's a whole formation that we talked about, in the side of the northwest. So it was impossible for them to approach from the other side without being surrounded on two sides. So they were forced, as it were, to go to that corner. And Joshua understood that by force they would be standing opposite them, and then they would think, the people of Ai would think that they could conquer them like they did before. So he's setting them up for disaster. That's really what's going on here. He's a good tactician, as you will. Okay. So then it says that the king didn't know that the ambushes were from behind the city. Shehagam Sharada Orev, because also when he saw the ambushes that were before the city, and then V'nishma mipanav l'ntot l'sod mizrach, so he guarded it from himself to stretch to the east side, lo yadam in the Orev Rishon, so he wouldn't know, he didn't realize there were people of the first, the 30,000 that were behind the city. Notice you only can prepare for what you see. I see the ambushes on one side and they're moving, fine. And then I see the people walking towards me. So I figure that's the whole army. Why would he think that, by the way?
That's what they did before.
Correct. They only sent 12,000 before. So why would I have my wildest dreams that you're going to send out the whole fighting army with you? It's not correct to think that way. You're not going to do that. Especially when you were defeated. So you're going to be afraid. So you're going to come and you're going to try to set up a little ambush. Ooh, scary. Okay. So we're going to come out and we're going to crush you once and for all. And we don't assume, we're very arrogant at this point. We don't assume to leave anybody in the city because you're not going to be smart enough. And it's all a frontal attack. I don't know if that was always frontal attack. Again, we had this discussion last time. But when guerrilla warfare came into it, I'm not sure. But this is the beginning of that, where we're setting up tactically how to take the city over. So it'll be interesting. This would be the first recorded story like that, because it is God. It's just showing that God, who was connected, doing this whole thing with Joshua anyway, is giving him the brains to how to set everything up, is telling everybody that this is the proper way to do it if you want to take over. So it'll be interesting. I don't know how you could prove it anyway, either, but, because this story was written later than Joshua. He didn't write this story. This story, Joshua was being written by Shmuel, I believe. So it's being written down much later. Okay. Anyway, I'm not 100% sure about that, who's writing. I'm pretty sure it's Shmuel who writes this. Okay, so Ve'inagu Yehoshua v'chol she'el lifneihem. Again, so now Joshua and the whole of Israel is coming toward them. Naga is touching them, like coming toward them. Vayanusu derech hamidbar, and they fled the way of the desert. No, so wait. Vayinagu is Vainagu is like plagued. So they were. It looked like they were running away. That's the point. Vainagu is because naga means to touch, but it can also mean to plague. So it looks like they're being plagued, and before them was okay. So that's the problem with translation too. You have to understand what the context is. So it looks like they're being plagued and they're running. Okay. So now, why are they running? So Rashi says, oh, there you go. Rashi identifies. Lashon nega is the language of nega. Vidbaru, they were broken. Okay. Heru atzman ki ilu hen negafim lefneim. They made themselves appear as if they were plagued before them. In other words, they're going to lose. So they don't want to do that, so they run. When you're going to lose, turn tail and get out of there. Okay? It's just not worth dying. So Rashi, so the Malbim says, again, Asu atzman ki ilu hen menugaim. They made themselves as if they were plagued. The Eish Lomar, and there was also say Shehumi bin. Okay, that's a grammatical point. Don't have to go through that. Vayenusu derech hamidbar, hu midbara Beit Aven. This is the desert, or the wilderness of Beit Aven, Anishkar Lael, which was mentioned above. Shaya ben Yericho uben Beit El, which was between Jericho and Beit El, opposite Ai to the northern side, because I was near Beit Aven. So I found that the Bnei Israel turned backwards to their north. Okay, and so that's what we're doing. Fine. Then the next one is 16. Vayiza'aku kol ha'am asher ba'ai, and it's written ba'ar, but we read it I. That's why I made that mistake. Okay, ba'ai is written with the letters ba'ir. Okay, Beit I and Yud Reish, but it's read Ba'ai. So the Yud Reish is extra. Why they did that? Like I said, that's, in all those questions, that's a great question, but not the class of that. So, all the nation, namely I, were yelling that they're dof achreim, to pursue after them, the Jews. Verdefu achrei Yehoshua, and they pursued after Joshua. Veinatku min ha'ir, and they emptied out from the city. So they left the whole city. What do you call it?
Unprotected.
Unprotected. That's what English is my first language. Okay. So Rashi, Mezuzah David explains what's v'yiza'aku, nitkapsu miza'akat me'asef. That means they were gathered together. When they were yelling, everybody, that was like a call to take arms. Okay, let's get together right now. So Malbim says, v'yiza'aku v'az gama'am nisha'aru be'ir. Now even the people that were left in the city to guard it, they pursued after the Jews too. Gam b'nei, gam anshe Beit El, ve'ir azu betucha. Also the people from Beit El, and the city was totally left unprotected, open, unprotected. Talk about making a major military mistake.
Big one.
But if you want to get rid of the people, okay, and they're running, and they turn tail on you and they're running, so I guess that's the best time to take them down. Okay? They will pay for this, but nonetheless, that was the plan. The Yom Hashem El Yeshua. So now God gets into the picture. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the line. Yud Zayin. V'lo nishar ish, not one man remained, ba'ai u Beit El, in I or Beit El, asher lo yatzeu acharei Yisrael, that did not go out after Israel. V'ya'azvu et ha'ir petucha, and they left the city open. V'yirdafu, and they pursued acharei Yisrael, after Israel. By the way, if you're watching how I'm reading, Jim, because you asked a question about the two dots, you'll notice that that's how you're breaking the sentence up. In other words, when v'lo nishar ish, next phrase is ba'ai u Beit El, two dots. Asher lo yatzeu, next, that's a little bit of a break. Acharei Yisrael, major break. V'yazvu ha'ir petucha, two dots again. V'yirdafu, break. Acharei Yisrael. Okay, so that's what the trope, that's what the cantillation does. It tells you how to break the sentence up.
Okay.
Again, that's not in the, if I would have a scroll, that would not be there. This is, like I always like to call it, the idiot books of the Jews. Okay, you have idiot guides to Jewish history and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. In that group, this is what the Masoretics did when they put this in the text. When they put the vowels down, they put the grammar down. This is so that any child could read it. Assuming that you knew what the system was, you could read it. So when and being taught how to properly do it.
Like me.
No, but it's very important that people understand what the things are doing, but what the notes are doing, what's going on here. But again, it's not going to be in a real text. If I open the Torah, there's no periods, nothing. There's no breaks. You just have to know where you're stopping. You have to know what you're reading, and you have to know the grammar. If you do all that, then you'll understand the Torah. If you don't, you're going to do a lot of memorizing. Okay, just to get everything done.
I have another question, but it goes back up to verse 15.
Go ahead.
The last word, midbar.
Yep.
In our Hebrew text, it's desert or wilderness.
Right.
Here I noticed Art Scroll in the comments from the commentators, they use grazing lands. Could that be used for any uninhabited area, like where there's no people but there's animals grazing? Or okay.
I shouldn't say that, because you're going to now think that Central Park in New York could be a midbar. No, it has to be uninhabited. It has to be uninhabited, not set aside, but set aside.
Out of the city,
out of everything. Where it's a wilderness. I mean,
it's not developed or anything.
Not developed. People are grazing there. It's whatever it's going to be. That's a wilderness. But if it's within a city, even though it's if you go out into some places they don't mow the lawn, it looks like a wilderness. And as you go up Ridgedale, but it's now I notice because the city cares if you mow your lawn here. I love the city for that. They give you notice. If you don't mow your lawn, we'll kick you out. Who cares? We don't have money to pay for the house anyway. But it's for a while, a lot of people didn't mow their lawn, so the grass was very high. That would not be called a wilderness. This is people don't want to mow the lawn. Okay, doesn't matter if there are people grazing there. It has to be a place that's unsettled and far from the city. You're going out from the city, so I'm not sure how far, but you have to be a distance. And it can't be again the state of Maine, where there's a lot of land is undeveloped. Or Canada, that's not wilderness because it's still controlled. So you have to. Wilderness is what we think of when we think of wilderness. Could also be grazing lands, but that's really pushing it. Okay. I'm not really sure why they want to say grazing lands. Unless it was in between the two cities, they want ours. Okay. But that may be why they did that. So I don't know who's saying it here. When it comes to Midbar. Who they quoting says?
Radak.
Oh, Radak. He says, Makomar Behemot for Midbar. Ben Samuchle Ben Recho. He says, okay, so he's giving you his explanation. He says, a place of grazing the animal, whether it's close to the city or far from the city. Since it says so I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to know where the Radak gets his information. Okay, I don't want to challenge Radak because I don't know what's going on there. But Rabbi David Kimchi, he was a grammarian and he says things which, like I said, I'm not sure where he got it from. Most times, the rabbis are getting it from the Gemaras. So he may have picked up from the Gemara, or I'm guessing he did. But since I'm not a Baki in all of Talmud, I can't tell you that for sure. But it's that would be my guess. I don't think he's coming up on his own to say that.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yud Chet. Okay. So now what happens? Vayomer Hashem al Yoshua. God, the commander in chief here, says to Joshua, Neteh b'kidon asher biyadcha elai. Stretch with the spear that is in your hand to ki biyadcha atnana, because into your hand I will give it. Future, I will give it. Vayet Yehoshua b'kidon asher biyado elai. And Joshua stretched the staff, the spear that was in his hand to the city. Okay? Good? No problems? Any problems?
How were the other people supposed to see this?
Which people?
Extended. I'm thinking again, my boot camp days.
Yeah.
We had the staff and we would see it. When it goes up, we, do whatever we're supposed to do. So we'd have to see it.
Right. Yeah. Who do you want to see it, though?
The people, the ambush people.
Ah!
How are they supposed to see it?
That's exactly what the Mesilas David says. That stretch, he answers a different way. He says, he's asking, why did he stretch out, why did God tell him to stretch out the staff?
Mm-hmm.
Or
It's
the
not like he
spear.
sent up a spear.
Right, so it was the signal, the ambushes to come out.
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to see it? They're obviously looking for it. Maybe they have a spyglass.
Mm.
Maybe, I'm not sure what they
Down
had.
over the hill or something.
I'm not sure what they had, but it was clear that's what they did it for, so that they would see it. Maybe from their vantage point, I'm not sure. You'd have to have a map to see where they are. Maybe they're on a hill.
Has everybody left the city already? Maybe somebody climbed up on top of a high structure to see.
It could be.
Yeah.
Again,
you have to see,
Have to
because
see
you
them
more than
somehow.
likely there's so much noise you're not going to hear it.
No, that's
You're
what
not
I
gonna hear
said.
anything, so you got to see it. Yeah.
Right.
Which is the same thing. That reminds me of being in boot camp and we're doing the what do they call it, the
close order drill. And
well when we're doing the marching at the end when we're graduation, because they're using the staff to give us because there's too much noise. You can't hear anybody giving orders, so you're watching the staff go up and down as to when they're supposed to turn and stuff.
But it's also like on board ship, you have lights and you have
signal
flags.
Signal flares,
exactly.
flags and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
But Joshua also could have been up on a high level someplace where they could see him easier also.
It must have been.
Right.
And then
But it had to
go
see.
go up with his hand.
Okay.
No, it was clearly for them to see, and that's why, according to Mr. David, they're stretching it out. Okay, good. It's great. Okay, go
Very
on.
well organized.
Mm-hmm.
God knows how to run the show. Absolutely. Okay. The Orev and the ambushes come mehera mimkomo. They got quickly from his place. Vayarutzu kintod yado, and they ran when he stretched out his arm. Vayavohu ha'ir, and they came to the city of Yilkadua, and they captured it. V'maharu, and they hurried. V'yatsitu. I'm getting Ashkenazic here. Okay. And they burned the city with fire. Okay. So Malbim says again, we already heard this. The Siman Shel, it was the sign to the, why did he stretch out his staff? It was a sign to the ambushes to get up from the southwestern edge of the city and to go and to conquer the place. To go and to conquer the city. Okay? Fine. So now, we're going to fly a little here because you have to understand the stories here. Vayefnu anshe ha'ai acharem. So now, the men of Ai turned from behind them. Vayiru, and they saw Vihine Allah Shana Ir Shemaima, that the pillar of not a pillar. The smoke was going up. The smoke of the city was going up to the sky. Lohaya behem yadayim lanus ehena vehena, and they didn't have the power. Or literally, it was not in their hands to flee here or there. Ve'am hanas hamidbar, and the nation that fled to the wilderness, nepach el harodef, turns to the pursuer. Understand? Yes. Y'all looking.
They mean an about face.
Correct. What happened is the people from Ai realized something's going on. Here he is. Think about the scene. The people are running. Suddenly Joshua turns around, raises his spear, and they're like, "Uh-oh, something's wrong here. Uh-oh." They turn around. Their city's in flames. The smoke is going up. They realize they've been defeated. Worse than that, the army that was running turns around and says, "Guess what, boys? We're about to have fun." Okay? And so the pursuers become the pursued. Okay?
Also, is there a connection between the word hand in the fact that the ambush party quickly rose from its place and they ran when he stretched out his hand, and then comparing that with the strength of the enemy, the word hand is used there also.
It could be very poetic at this point. Yeah. Right. It's Rashi just says Yadayim means koach, just a power, and because where's your power? In your hands. So this expression becomes the idiomatic expression for power. And it says the nation. Okay, so now let's go to the Malbim, see what happens. So they turned and they didn't have any power, and they had no power. It says Techila. At the beginning, when Joshua first stretched forth his hand with his spear, Amdu haborchim, so the pursuers stood. The fleers stood. Upanu pneihem neged oyev, and they turned their face toward the enemy. The oyev nivhal, and the enemy was startled. Kira ashona irmeachara, because they saw the smoke rising from the city behind them. Machane lefanav, and the camp was before them. Va'amdu nivhalim mibliyodim malasot, and they stood astonished or startled, scared because they didn't know what to do. V'achar zaman, and after a moment, Mag kishar Yoshua yuchal ha'orev l'seven ir, when Joshua he measured the time that he knew that the ambushes could go out from the city, lahazkir ha'oyev, so that they could surround the enemy, bal yifalet lo palit, so that there would be no survivors. This is not going to be a fun battle. There is not going to be a survivor. There's not going to be fire. There's nothing. We're going to destroy you. Okay? Because and only because God said so.
So this is an example of a war of extermination.
A war of God. I'm not going to get into extermination, because extermination is for animals. But this is a war, a total victory war that God wanted. He said, you must wipe out all these people, otherwise there will be thorns in your eyes, and so on and so forth. This is what we call a milchamat Hashem, a war of God, as compared to milchamat reshut, which is a war that's just for land. When I'm going for land, I'm not allowed to wipe out the entire population. Here, I'm commanded to wipe out the entire population. So there's a difference here. That's why I want to make it very clear. It's not that they're doing it for land, they're not doing it for the money, they're not doing it for anything else. It's just because God said so. And it's very, very difficult. I mean, it's probably one of the hardest things to understand. Why God would decide that these people have to be wiped out. Why His creations have to be wiped out. The fact that we follow the orders, at least at this stage in our conquering days, is a miracle in itself, because like I said, as we will go on, we will see that it doesn't continue on like that. People cannot do that. They just don't do it. But it's at this point, they were. And he had it set up where everybody's going to come together, and boom. Of course, there was no Geneva Convention. There was nothing else. Everybody was your sworn enemy. We have to remember that too. In those days, if you attacked, then I would always want to get you back. So that's really, that is a basic reason why you want to just get rid of everybody at once. Because otherwise you're constantly going to be fighting these wars. So get it over with right now. And that was just a normal way of that system. And they didn't want them, they didn't accept to be the servants of the state to begin with. Remember, they always had a choice. If I go in, I'm going in, I'm offering you peace as long as you pay my taxes. You live by the 7 Noahide laws, and what's the third one? I forget the third one already. But there's a third. There's one more thing I'm missing here. But basically, you have to pay taxes. Become the servants of the people, but that's paying taxes. That's another part of paying taxes. And then, like I said, you have to accept the 7 Noahide commandments. So if you did that, you too could be saved in a normal war. And according to the rabbis, they say even in these wars, they could have had that, which is why we're going to hear about the Girgish later on, the Gibeonites, who come, but for different reasons, they do what they do. And we'll get into that. But it's that's what's going on here. So, did God really give them a chance, or did God say no? That's a question that's being asked here, and it's really, like I said, it's a question on God. What's happening? But we're going to go on, so I don't want to stop there. I want you the end of the story to prove one simple point of why they went to war compared to why we in the normal world go to war. So let's go on. And it says, where was it? I got to 20?
20 and 21.
Yeah.
21? Okay. Yeah, 21. So Yeshua v'chol Yisrael, so Joshua and the whole of Israel, Ra'u saw Hilachad ha'orev that the ambushers had conquered the city. V'chi Allah Ashan and they saw the smoke of the city going up. Vayashuvu, and they turned. Vayaku et Anshe and they killed the men of Ai. Oh, I said here. Anshe Ai. They killed the men of Ai. Ve'ele yatzu min ha'ir lekvartam, and these from the city. They left from the city to meet them. Yisrael betavech. So you had the Jews in the middle. Eile mizeh from both sides. Ve'ekvotam adilti hishalo sarid palit. And they killed them, so there was no remainer, no survivor. It's also interesting. He says until there did not remain from him a survivor, a remnant, or a survivor. So the question would be, why those two terms? And just keep that in mind. Okay, I don't know if I'll answer, but that would be one of the questions. At Melech Ai Tafsu Chai, the king of Ai, they grabbed while he was alive. V'ekriva oto al Yeshua, and they brought him to Joshua. Vayiki chalot Yisrael harog ekol Yosheir v'sadev midbar shirudufumbo. So it was when Israel completed killing all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, in the wilderness, that they pursued them in. Vayivlu kulam l'fnei cherav atumam, and all of them died or fell by the sword until they were finished. Vayashuvu kol Yisrael ha'ai. All of the Jews returned to Ai v'yaku otal lefichav, and they destroyed it by the sword. Vayi kol hanoflim b'yom hahu, and it was all the people who died in that day, me'ish v'ad isha, from man to woman, shneim asar elef, 12,000 kol anshe Ai. So the entire population of Ai, which was 12,000. I'm not sure if that's including the people in the battlefield or not, but there's 12,000 they're counting. And Joshua did not bring his hand back, that he stretched out his sword, stretched out his spear, until the job was done, till the whole city was rubble. Only the animals and the property of the city, that they Bazu lehem Yisrael, the people took. Why they take it? K'devar Hashem, as Hashem said they could. Asher tzivat Yeshua, that it was promised to Joshua. Vayisrof Yeshua the Ai. Joshua destroys the Ai. V'simet tel olam shmama, and he makes it a mound of destruction ad hayom today, until this very day. In other words, they didn't get the land. It's an interesting thing. I'm taking over a piece of land. I'm fighting you, but I'm not taking it over. But it's my land. I'm leaving it as a tel olam, not as a tel. It's gonna. By the way, for those who are into what's it called? Archaeology. Tel. It's the same thing. Okay. So you can that's why the archaeologists, when they learn the Bible before they do any of these things. They want to see, where was it supposed to be? Can we find a remnant of it? And that's why it's called a tel. So it's interesting. A mound. That's all it is. That's all it is, a mound of earth. But so we're seeing that Joshua they weren't caught, and that's the point of Milchamet Hashem. You're not conquering it for land. You're conquering because God said so. You're not getting any real benefit from it, except that they got the animals and some booty. But otherwise, you're not getting. You would think that if I'm going to conquer land, I would take that land over myself. The interesting was when the Romans took over Israel, because they didn't want, and they changed it to Philistia, okay? Palestine, Philistia, because the Philistines were the ancient enemies of the Jews, and what a stab in the back that was. But what they also did was, they did a type of Milchemes Hashem that way, not that it was for God, but they salted the fields. Why did they salt the fields? So that we couldn't live there anymore. You couldn't grow anything. So they wanted to impoverish the land, because they knew that the land was a good land. People were growing, it was a land of milk and honey, blah, 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 all that wonderful stuff. And it was lasted, their destruction of that land. Talk about not being Greenpeace. That basically was destroyed land for about 2,000 years from the assaulting of the fields. Okay? Until the Jews finally came back. Okay? But it's an amazing thing. But here we're seeing that he just burned it down as it was commanded, and there was nothing you could do about that. And it says, Ed Melech Ai, then you have the king of Ai, Tala al Ha'etz. They hanged him on the tree, ad Eid Ha'erev, until the evening time. Uchavo Hashemesh, and when sunset came, Tziva Yehoshua, Joshua commanded V'yoridu et Nivlatom in Ha'etz. They brought him his corpse down from the tree, V'yashlichu ota el petach sha'ar ha'er. And here is a very uncomplimentary word. They threw it. What's the it? By the way, the it is feminine. If you see the ota is feminine, they threw her, which really is it, talking about the body, the goof, because the goof is feminine. So el petach sha'ar ha'er, to the opening of the wall of the gate of the city. Vayakimu alav galav anim gadol, and they erected upon him or it a large mound of stones ad hayom hazeh, until that very day. Okay, so here we go. So now let's look at the Malbim, and it says 20. So he turned, and there wasn't, and they and they had no powers. Did we do this already? Oh, I'm sorry, we did that. Okay, so it says in 22, when it says that they went out from the city, the ambushes went out to the city to meet them, because they had wanted to run back to the city. Here, when all this is lost, let's go back, close the city up and close behind us. No, they were cornered. And so the Jews were in the middle. They found the people of Ai and Beidel found themselves surrounded on all four sides. Like I said, because that's how it was set up, they just surrounded them. So now, since they originally were surrounded on the north and the west, now the people coming from the south, the sudden Mizrach HaPatuach, and the east was open. Toward Jericho, which was already under Jewish rule. And from this you could see the wisdom of Joshua. That it was that surrounded the enemy from all four sides. Okay? That's how the Malbim. He's not looking at anything else. Interestingly enough, he just assumes that you're going to get the rest of the story as to why everything is the way they did it. But really what's going on here, like I said, is a matter, nobody's really commenting on the story. It's just telling you what happened. But like I said, what you have to pull out of that is they could only do what God said, and they were following those orders specifically at this point. Okay, then Lamed, Az Yivne Yehoshua Mizbech. Then Joshua built an altar, LaHashem Elokei Israel, to God, the God of the Jews. Bahar Eval, in Har Eval. So now Rashi says, Parsha Zu Ketuv Mukdam Mucha. This Parsha, this section is written out of order. Okay? Shemiyom Avro Yarden Asikim. Because the day they passed the Jordan, that's when they put up the altar at Har Eval. Mount Ebal, you would say, I guess, in English, okay? So that's just keep that in mind. Rashi is saying this is out of order. And then Lamed Aleph, Ka'ashet Tziva Hashem, Moshe, Eved Hashem, just as Moses, the servant of Hashem, commanded, Ep Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, Kakatu B'Sefer Torah Moshe, like it was written in the book of the Torah of Moshe, Mizbach Avanim Shlemot, an altar of complete stones. That's also an interesting language. What does complete stones mean? That a sword or a metal didn't cut it. We're going to say that anyway. That the sword or metal doesn't cut it. And so he brings up total burnt offerings to God. And he also offered peace offerings. 8 Mishnat Torah Moshe. And he also wrote there on the stones the Torah, the explanations of the Torah of Moshe Asher Katav Lifnei Bnei Israel that he wrote before Bnei Israel. Okay, so let's see what happens here. And Rashi explains again. He wrote there on the stones. Again, this is the stones that were said above. The Acher Mas and after this the story Kaflu Hasid Me'alem, he puts lime on them. Ve'havium HaGilgal, and he brings them to Gilgal. Okay, so Rashi is really saying this whole thing was out of order. It's a very interesting thing. The Malbim doesn't quite agree. And I don't know if we're going to. No, we're not going to touch it today. We'll have to stop here. I'm going to keep you in suspense.
For a month.
For a month. That's right.
For a month.
Yeah, that's right. You will be in suspense for a month as to whether or not how we understand this. Is it really out of order or not?
That's verse 30, right?
Verse 30 in the Malbim. Okay? Just remind me that we have to go through that. Otherwise I will forget.